now I'm actually curious. How many of you actually heard of Chegg? See why I didn't buy the stock? These old people. So first of all, it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be here associated with anything associated with Bill Campbell. You've seen some of the best of what the impacts on people's lives that Bill's had by seeing Brad Smith, who is, probably one of the top 5 CEOs in this country, and leaders and fathers, and I happen to know one of his daughters well, and admire him and everything that he's done. But he follows a very common pattern of people associated with the name Bill Campbell, which is he's somebody you not likely have heard of until you do. Somebody that you weren't sure, or he probably wasn't sure themselves of what they were capable of until Bill came into their lives. So I am less famous. I'm slightly better looking. I think we could all agree with that. But I follow a similar pattern, and I think that's something that they would like for you and any of us associated, connected, touched by, inspired by, changed by Bill Campbell would want you to feel also. So you are a rare breed, which is you are both athletic and academic. I am not either of those breeds, so you are very fortunate. And so I want to just share a little bit of my experiences and then connect them to Bill and connect them to you, and then take questions if that makes sense to everybody. Is that all right? Okay. So I often talk to business schools, which amuses me because I never went to one. But I talk to them about the difference between being an executive, being an entrepreneur, and being a founder. Because everybody in this room is very likely going to be one of those. So what's the difference? And what does it mean to have the name Campbell associated with you? It means you're likely going to be successful at any of those, although at the moment you may not be sure of which one you are, or which path you're going to take, or feel comfortable yet in knowing what that's going to be. So what is an executive? So I tell the story. Let me go back and say, how many of you ever heard of Dobbs Ferry, New York? Okay, one, my hero. So none of you, except that handsome man right there, because handsome is what comes out of Dobbs Ferry. So you would think you guys have had great success. I was born in Dobbs Ferry, New York. So you would think a guy like me out of a place that none of you have ever heard of likely got to be one of the most successful people to come out of Dobbs Ferry, right? That would make sense. A place you never heard of, small town. Well, it turns out that I don't even have bragging rights to that, because who else came out of Dobbs Ferry, New York? Somebody you might have heard of, Mark Zuckerberg. So here I am thinking I'm a big shot, coming out of a place one guy heard of, not even close. And my mom's, I didn't have a father growing up, then my mom got remarried and we moved to a place called Scarsdale, New York. Everybody here Scarsdale, New York? More of you. Very wealthy town, excellent public school systems at the time, ranked #1. But when I moved there at 10, it's the first time I'd ever seen a house, which, by the way, was much cooler than my apartment because it had another bathroom. But in Scarsdale, it's harder to be well-known, right? Because there's a lot of amazing people that have come out of Scarsdale. I can list them all. You've heard a lot of them. We've had astronauts, and we've had diplomats, and we've had writers and authors and all sorts of things. So I would narrow it down and say, I gotta be one of the most important people to come out of my class. Like the class of '79, that's like needle in a haystack, right? So turns out, not even close. You ever hear of a guy named Aaron Sorkin? Social Network, Few Good Men, West Wing, that. Aaron and I went to high school and graduated together. So I'm not even famous from the town I was born in, not even famous from my own class. Then I went to a school, let's try this one, Hobart William Smith. Anybody ever hear Hobart William Smith? Thank you. All of you had an alternative school in case you didn't get into your reach school, right? Thank you, that was my school. So I gotta be one of the better known people to come out of Hobart William Smith. Well, turns out I graduated with a woman named Abigail Johnson. Anybody hear Abigail Johnson or the Johnson family? Anybody hear Fidelity? Jones Fidelity. So What is my point in telling you this? You heard my bio, COO of Yahoo, I was CEO of ZDNet, publisher of PC Magazine, COO of Yahoo, CEO of Guitar Hero, CEO of Chegg. Pretty good resume on paper, right? You'd like to have one of those resumes on paper. Except what I learned is everywhere I've gone, there was always somebody better, smarter, taller, shorter, better looking, richer. There was always somebody else that I always felt lesser than. And I have to imagine in your careers, how many of you have felt that way? So we can empathize with that. Bill Campbell always knew that about people. They always knew that what they were worried about was the next person, the next man or woman. I stand here literally humbled by the success that somebody who's created a $50 billion market cap company. I mean, we're bragging about my stock going from 3 to 30, which is not bad, but it's still from 300 million to 3.5 billion. That guy has a good quarter. He's going to make that in a day for his company. So there's always somebody better, smarter, faster. So how do we deal with that? How do I get up in the morning? No, I'm going to be following Brad Smith, and tomorrow you're going to talk to Hall of Famers and Super Bowl champions. It's a little humiliating, could be, right? You ever feel that way? Like, why am I in a room with those people? Well, what Bill taught me was this. You are who you are. His goal for me, his goal for this award, the group that supports it, is how do you get the best out of yourself? How do you figure out who you are? How do you figure out who your path is? How do you stop worrying, if I had just not had that knee injury, I'd be in the NFL? Or so-and-so, I went to college with so-and-so, and they're an EVP, and I'm a director. I must be somewhere in my career I don't belong. Well, what Bill always taught me was your path is up to you. It's up to your own commitment. It's up to your own capabilities. And so I'm going to tell you the story of the executive, the entrepreneur, and the founder, because you're going to have to figure out which one you are. How many of you think you're going to found a company? A couple of you. So let me describe what a founder is. They're crazy. They're absolutely nuts. I've never met a founder in this town that thought that they were wrong, thought they failed. Right? They say this town rewards failure. It doesn't reward failure. It doesn't acknowledge failure. Anybody hear the word pivot? That's my favorite. Pivot was a word invented by a founder and a venture capitalist to avoid the down round. My business is not performing on what I said I was going to do, so I pivoted to an even bigger business. So give me more money at a higher valuation. I've pivoted twice. It works. I recommend the pivot. So this is not a town that readily acknowledges failure because founders don't acknowledge it. They shouldn't have to. They're a rare breed. By their nature, they're a pain in the ass. They see a world that I don't see. I am not a founder. Bill could work with founders and he could work with non-founders. Because he could get each one of us to become who we were capable of being if we committed to ourselves. So a founder is somebody that's crazy, that's never been wrong, that sees things that we don't see, and owns every aspect of it. They become, they are, they want the ball at the end of the game. And they will play that game. I mean, it's hysterical. Webvan was one of the biggest failures this town ever saw, and now there are, what, 50 delivery companies? So the people from Webvan are saying, see, we didn't fail, we were just too early. So if you think you're going to be a founder, you better be somebody that doesn't care what anybody thinks. Because everybody you meet is going to think against you. By its nature, you're coming up with something that no one else has yet, and you have to have the ability to imagine it, to communicate it, to get people to believe in it, to take it from your brain to an actual entity, and then to get people to come along with you. And you have to assume all along the way you're going to have naysayers. Now, many of you have had that probably in your athletic careers. So you're familiar with that. But if you're going to be a founder, you have to have that kind of commitment and belief that what you're starting in your brain today is exactly what you're going to be doing 25 years from now. Because the great founders, they just remain founders. Facebook, Apple, Google, Microsoft. Bill Gates is still there. Jeff Bezos is still there. So I find that a lot of people at your stage of life think they're going to be founders, and then you realize you're not really a founder. So let's go to the other end of the spectrum, executive. What's an executive? An executive is somebody that matters. They have huge impact. They're part of the team. They make big decisions. They help create and advance a culture. They're responsible for large parts of businesses, and they matter. However, they don't get the ball at the end. They can leave whenever they want. If there's a better opportunity, they feel greater freedom to exit and do something else. You have more mobility in your life. Many people who have the academic capability that you do become extraordinarily successful executives, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you live in this town, most people don't talk about it. I spent 40 years of my life being an executive, and I couldn't have been happier. In fact, I might not have left, except the owners of my company, the founders, sold it, which was a magazine publishing company in the computer industry. Executives are absolutely necessary, required, and help build success. If you look at my team, almost all the people that work with me have been with me now for 8 years, which is a rarity in Silicon Valley. The average employee stays here 18 months. I've got people who stayed with me for 8 years. They love what they do it extraordinarily well. They matter to me, they matter to the company, they matter to the business. But at the end of the day, they can go home saying, Dan's got this. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, there's a lot right with it. And then there's the entrepreneur. How many of you think you're an entrepreneur? Most of us don't even know what it means, including myself, until I came across Bill. At 40 years old, I decided for the first time to take a risk, a professional risk in my life. I've been a successful executive all that time. Was a major contributor, got all the special benefits from the founder of the company, always got raises, nobody wanted me to leave, but something happened to me at 40, which is I decided I was tired of hearing all my friends making all this money and having all this success. And I analyzed, what's the difference between them and me? And you know what it was? They took the field. I hadn't, right? They decided to put themselves at risk. And up to that point, I had decided to not be the guy, but to be the guy that made the guy happy. And I loved making the guy happy. But it turned out I had more in me. I just didn't know what it was. So to become the person, instead of the person that makes the person happy, I needed to take a risk. And I took a risk. I moved out here in 2002. I borrowed $1 million from Yahoo, which is the last executive in this country to be allowed to do that, thanks to Enron, which screwed me because the idea was I was going to do exactly what they did, which is borrow the money and never pay it back. And then I had to pay it back, so I took a double risk. I took a mortgage on a house out here, more expensive than the entire house that I lived in. And I took a wife and 2 young daughters with me. Ask me how that went. Not well. But I went to Yahoo and worked with a team to turn around a company. But that was the first time that I put myself actually at risk. Because as an executive, you can lose your job, you can get another job. But this was the first time that I was personally, financially, emotionally, physically invested. And a lot of people say, you know, Dan, you've been very lucky. And that may be true, but it has nothing to do with my career. Because as Bill has told me, or did tell me, luck is something that happens to you. You can have good fortune and you can have bad fortune. My choices happened to work because I was a participant in making them work, but they might not have worked. So I had good fortune, and I got financial security, which was very fortunate for me somewhere in my mid-40s. Because that was the first time I moved from executive to entrepreneur. Because that was the first time I was willing to own that responsibility right up to the end and be financially invested in it the same way that the owners were. And when I took over Chegg, I had been good, I had been successful, but I'd never been great. And that's when I called Bill. So an entrepreneur is somebody that is willing to take the place of a founder but didn't have the original idea. Believes it in their soul, makes it their own, feels that they have the ball at the end, willing to own that final decision. And as I'm sure Brad has indicated to you, every CEO decision by its nature is 51-49. There is no way to know if your decision is right. There's absolutely no way, because you never know the road not taken. We'll never know if I had done this, if it had gone better or worse. So I'm not known for a lot of things, but one of the things I'm known for, if you read the history of Facebook, is I'm the guy that offered Zuckerberg the $1 billion that he took. So people say, Dan, if Yahoo had followed through with that, do you realize how different your life would be, how different Yahoo would be? I was like, or we could have screwed it up. And then I had the opportunity to get the job that Sheryl Sandberg took. So I introduced Sheryl to Mark. They're like, you'd have been a billionaire. I said, or I might have been fired. We'll never know. I only know the path that I did take. So what Bill helped me learn is the path you're on is the path you own. So when I took over Chegg, I was told Chegg was going to go public in 6 months. I could stay 2 years, and I could make tens of millions of dollars. Who'd sign up for that? Okay, those of you who wouldn't sign up for that are the ones that have concussions. Because that's about the easiest thing to say yes to. It turned out, instead of 6 months to an IPO, we were 90 days to go and broke. Yeah, that's what I said. So I called on a gentleman named Bill Campbell. I went to his office. I got on my knees, and I said, I've always been good. I've never been great. Can you help me? And he said, how many of you met Bill? Okay, so those of you who met him know that what I say is something he would have said. He goes, why the fuck not? So he came to my office, and he said to my team, I'm Bill Campbell. I don't take money. I don't take stock, and I don't take shit. I'm here because I like Dan's daughters. I like his wife, and I can put up with Dan. Either you get in or you get out. First meeting. Scared the crap out of everybody, including me. But I want to share one story that I like to share, which is the thing that really turned around my ability to make Chegg successful. Because clearly, it has been, at least for now. Determination, grit, stick-to-itiveness, no quitting. This is all the things that you must have been doing in your life up to this point, or you would not be in this room. You have overcome obstacles, you've overcome problems, you've overcome challenges, you've not been the biggest, you've not been the fastest, but you've been successful in everything you've ever done. And so you have it in you. I didn't realize I had it in me. So when I turned to Bill and I said, look, the company's different than what they told me. They told me this, it's this. Bill said, what are you going to do? I said, what do you mean what I'm going to do? He goes, well, once you know, you only have two choices. Get out right then, because it's not what you thought. But once you don't get out, you own it. You can never bitch about it again. You know this company is broken. You don't leave. You never have a right to say somebody did this to you. Does that make sense? Well, it didn't make sense to me at first, but then it really made sense to me. It's like, how are you going to be successful bitching about the fact that what you were told wasn't true? Right? The only way to be successful is acknowledging these are the facts and dealing with it. And you have to do that in your lives and your careers every day. And so at one point, we'd gone public. We priced at $12.50. First trade was at $11.25, which I still believe is illegal. First day closed at $9.68. How's that? It was my 25th wedding anniversary. I bought my wife something extraordinarily expensive because I thought the price was going to go up. Give it to her before we go public. I'm on CNBC with my two daughters and my wife and friends that I invited to see us go public standing there as the stock went like this. Want to be humbled? Do that. But good news for me, it got worse. We closed at $9.68 that day. It was as low as $3.15. And that day, anybody watch Mad Money with Jim Cramer? That day I was scheduled to be on Mad Money with Jim Cramer. What a day. Stock dropped 38% in one day. Unexpected. This is way after we had gone public. Entirely unexpected. How many times during that day do you think I said to myself, I'm going to cancel that interview? About every second of that day. But in my mind was Bill Campbell said, you own it. If you can't stand up for it, who's going to stand up for it? So I went, and I was exhausted and beat up and humbled and humiliated and slightly less wealthy. And Jim Cramer asked me, he said, Dan, did you expect this reaction to your earnings call? And so I guess I went off script because I was literally exhausted mentally. And I turned to him, I said, Jim, do you think if I thought this was the reaction, I would have booked your show? And the stock popped 20% the next day. Because that was the beginning of the turnaround. Because that was the beginning of the day that my team believed that I was willing to stand up and fight for them. I wasn't going to hide for them. Does that make sense? So I'll tell you one more Bill story, and then we'll take questions. So as we were going through that, you can waver. Any of you ever waver in your decisions when it's not going well? Okay, we all do. And you can have one foot out, whether it's in a relationship or whether it's in a play or whether it's in your academics or in your career, right? There's always that, when I was growing up, it was always like, you know what? If I don't win, I can always beat the shit out of that guy. That was my out. Okay, well, I lived in Scarsdale. I could beat the shit out of them, not you, right? They're smaller people. So when the stock was hovering around $4 or $5 a share, we'd come back from the 315. We'd started, but it was exhausting. And the two hard times to run a company. One, when nobody believes and you're unsure, and the one when everybody believes. So this was the nobody believes and you're unsure because the things we were investing in hadn't worked yet. But they might. We believed in them, but we weren't sure. So I got a call to take my dream job. Since I was 10 years old, it was a job I wanted. I actually got the call to take it. I won't tell you what it is. And so somehow or another, intuitively, instinctively, through his amazing grapevine, Bill had heard that I was considering leaving. So I get a call. Bill was struggling at the end. I get a call. My assistant said, Bill's on the phone. So I go running up to take it. And I said, Bill, everything okay? He said, everything's fine. He goes, we're going to take a walk. I said, you feel well enough to walk? I'll be at your house in 20 minutes. He said, oh, no. I said, wow, you're going to come here? Everybody would love to see you. I mean, our quad is named the Bill Campbell Quad. That's how much Bill affected our company. We pin our success on him. He said, no. He said, we're going to take I said, where are we going? He goes, we're going to take a virtual walk. I'm like, all right, Bill's an internet guy, virtual walk. I said, where are we going? He said, we're going to take a walk behind the woodshed. I'm like, okay, do I leave my pants on or I take them off? He said, leave them on, but you're going to feel it. He said, Dan, are you a leader? Of course, he didn't wait for that answer. He said, are you a leader? Because leaders don't go left and right, they go forward. People can't follow people unless they're going in a direction, and that direction has to be forward. Leaders don't waver. So if you got one foot in and one foot out, you're not a leader. If you're a leader, Dan, effing lead, hung up the phone. From that moment, I called my team in, and I said, same story I'm telling you. Less humor at the time, because I was feeling it. Because that's like, holy crap, wake-up call, right? I turned to the team and I said, look, today we decide together are we in or we out. I'm in. I'm committing for the next 3 years, come hell or high water, unless the board fires me. I'm in. And this is what it means to be in. Today, you tell me, right now, you don't get to ask anybody, you get to decide for yourself, are you in or are you out? If you're out, you don't have to leave today. We will figure out your exit, but now I know who we can count on. And if you're in, then you're in for 3 years. Shake my hand, look me in the eyes. I will take care of you financially, but you're either in or you're out today, because today is the day where we commit to building this thing successfully or finding out it can't be done. And from that day forward, we have executed. And so whether it's take the right golf club, your own swing, I needed to be reminded what a leader does. I needed to be reminded what commitment does. I needed to be reminded that my job is to figure that problem out, not to bitch about it. And I needed to be reminded that if I believe in myself, other people have a better chance of believing in me. And people, even leaders, want to be led. So to me, that's a little bit of my work history, a little bit of how I came from somebody who you've never heard of, from a town you never heard of, from a college you never heard of, was never the best, brightest, always the best looking. I had one thing going for me, but never the best at anything that I did until I decided to be me. And that I got from Bill. Does that make sense? Questions?
You said your team was with you, or your team is with you, and they've been with you for 8 years. So how do you handle that delicate balance of empowering new personnel within your company to challenge the status quo and to challenge their superiors and people that might have been there for a long time, but keeping those who are tenured comfortable and feel like they're stable within the company?
That is an amazingly complicated and brilliant question. So let me just eliminate one word. There's nobody superior. There may be people who have different responsibilities, and those responsibilities may hold different levels. So that we have gone from 50 people when I started to 1,000. And we've gone from one business to multiple, and we've gone from one city to having offices around the world. So that question comes up every day. And so the thing that we focused on was writing our values. Because you can actually have multiple cultures. There's going to be an engineering culture. There's going to be a sales culture. Our Portland office, which is customer service, is going to have a Portland culture. They're going to like the Portland basketball team. Nobody here is. But you have to have one set of values. What do you stand for as a company, and what do you promote and acknowledge? So sometimes in athletics, they have to promote the person who's very best at the one thing that needs to be done and doesn't have to have the rest. In a corporation, you can't do that because there's no end of the season. There's no graduation, right? So you have to find somebody who contains the values. So whether it's authenticity or communication or the ability to succeed by bringing people with you instead of at the expense of other people. And then the infrastructure needs to reward those people and visibly reward them. So we have something called the Chegg Value Awards, which are voted on by Chegg employees about their peers. And you have to be, as a leader, willing to take on diverse opinions. Diverse opinions, it's hard to define that. It could be from somebody at a different level. It could be from somebody from different geography, somebody from different backgrounds, somebody from different countries, somebody from a different point of view. Your job as a leader, and I got this from another great sort of mentor of mine, General Colin Powell, was when you're at the top or you're leading, you know the least about what's actually going on the field for the moment. If you're the coach, you can look at all the film you want, but you're not sitting in front of that guy in front of you, right? So what he said was when you're trying to make a decision, you have to ask a lot of questions. And your questions have to make sense to you. They don't have to make sense to who you're questioning. Because what you have to do is test the information, the confidence of that person giving you the information, the commitment of that person giving you the information, how many other people are on board with that and not on board with that, and you have to go through your process. And once you have 70% of that information in your head, where you think the next 30% isn't going to affect the decision any more than it is, then you start telling people what to do. So in other words, how do we do that? We empower people by having clear values. We always say, what's the problem we're solving for? So everybody knows what we're trying to do. We've defined what's the definition of success, because then it's less about who does it or how it gets done. It's more about what's the result of when it gets done. And then everybody knows the way to get a yes or a no is to, if you don't have those two and you can't tell me why is it big enough to matter for the company, then it's on you, it's not on me. And over years, you can do that. And so when new people come in, they are immediately indoctrinated. Like, how does Alabama keep winning? Or how does New England keep winning? Or how do the Warriors keep winning? They have a way. And that way is taught by your employees, not just by the coaches, because that's why people come there. That's the system in which people can be successful. And the system isn't, nobody can do what they don't want to do. The system is we know what we're supposed to do. We know why we're supposed to do it. We know the result we're looking for. And we know the job is to get the best out of each of our individual players the best way they know how to do it. Does that make sense? So sometimes we succeed, sometimes we fail, but so far so good. Great question. Yes, sir. You're welcome. Yeah. Well, that is a very difficult question, and I pay somebody $300 an hour every 2 weeks to help me with that question. Because there's nobody in my family I haven't let down at some point. So I'll start with this. It's not about letting them down. It's about, are you letting yourself down? So I'll give you a football story that's nothing to do with any of you in this room, but Matt Millen was the GM of Detroit Lions, and he kept drafting receivers, right, every year. And then he got fired because they went 0 and whatever. And he said his only regret, which is the reason he got fired, was he kept listening to other people instead of making his own choices. So what you have to reach is that place in yourself where you have your blinders on. And you say, I'm not worried about what mom or dad thinks, or boyfriend, girlfriend, grandparent, friend, whomever, mentor. You have to decide who you are, what's important to you, and how are you going to attack it the best way you know how, with your value and your ethics. You don't let them down in those ways. You feel like you're letting them down in your choices, right? Not ethical choices or moral choices, but career choices, right? Or school choices, the same way we all do. I tell young people, there's always the right school for you. It's not necessarily the right school for your mother. And so there's always the right career for you. I promise you, no one got up in the morning and said, look, I didn't know where I was going to end up. Life is serendipity. If I told you the real story of my first job and getting laid off in the first 2 hours, and then going to the job that I thought I was going to take before then, and finding out that all the people that hired me were in a different department, in a different division of the company that had only been formed in 1 week. I mean, stuff happens. You own it. So what I would say to you is, your responsibility is, do you feel like when you get up the next day, you are proud of the choices that you made? And if you are, over time, people are going to come with you. The truth in their disappointment is when they don't feel like you're committed to your own choices. You're just too young to know that yet. Does that make sense? It's a great question. And I have a great guy if you want to talk to him.
One last question.
Well, how do you know? Maybe I want to stay here all day.
Well, we've got a break, so anybody can...
All right, who's got... All right. You're between you and the bathroom, so go ahead. Better be good. Yeah, that is these are all great questions, and I thank you for all of them. And I will say that, when I grew up, times were different. So there was less individuality. So I came into a job and always asked, who had it before me? Why don't they have it now? And how can I do it 10% better than them? And then I met these internet people in 96 and 97, and they walked in a room and they said, what's the problem that needs to be solved? What's the most efficient way to solve it? And that was the evolution of my changing of my thinking. So I grew up in New York. New York is much more hierarchical than Silicon Valley. And so Silicon Valley is a little bit easier to do that, but not every part of the country is to do that. And I think there's always two people in that discussion, you and the other person. If you want to do something differently, You have to break it into, do you want to do something differently that has a different outcome than the company or the boss is looking for? Or do you want to do something that the company and the boss is looking for, but the way you want to execute on it may not be the way that they want to? And if it's the first, I can't help you. If it's the second, then the key is authenticity and communication between you and that person or that group of people. In other words, there's nothing wrong with that. So if you say to the person, here's the problem we're trying to solve. This is why we try to create a common language. It works most times, not all the times. But we try to create a common language and say, if we know that's what we're going after, and we know once we're done, we're going to measure it, and this is what we want to see, then the way we do it, as long as it's legal, ethical, and moral, is less important to me, because I'm not the one that's going to be executing it, you are. And so you have to build enough confidence in yourself and in the people around you that if you're allowed to do it the way you think it best be done, which is why we hired you, you'll get that result and better. That's incumbent upon you to make that case. It's not incumbent upon you to just do it. It's not incumbent upon you to bitch that they don't let you do it. If they don't let you do it, it's because they're not convinced you're capable of it. And I got one football story here. Sorry. No. So this is not those two handsome gentlemen in the back who are amongst the finest athletes that I know, Kobe Fleener and Sam Schwartzstein. But one of their teammates, Zach Ertz. So a couple of years ago, Zach was on the field 46% of the time. I don't even know what that meant, right? And he's complaining that he's not on the field 86% of the time. So I said, look, that's out of my league. So a mutual friend who you'll hear from tomorrow, mutual friend and mentor of theirs, Ronnie Lott. I said, Ronnie, let's go out to dinner with a Hall of Famer. You think you're a Hall of Famer in your second year? Why don't you actually meet one and talk to one? Because I'm not a Hall of Famer. So we sat down, and Ronnie went through the whole thing with him. He said, I should be on the field 86% of the time, I'm on the field 46% of the time. And Ronnie said to him, why do you think that is? And he says, the coach doesn't think I can block as well as the other guy. And so Ronnie said, well, what do you think? He said, I think I can block better than him. He said, well, that's not the question. It doesn't matter if you can or you can't. It matters whether the coach believes you can or you can't. So what are you going to do to change that coach's perception? That you care about that. Not that he's wrong, but that you get why that matters to him. See the difference? And so that night, Ronnie told him to text his coach, which he did, to say, can you help me find somebody to teach me to block better? I'll pay for him with my own money, but I want to go learn how to block better. Whether he got better or not is a different question, but the perception that he understood what the company needed, in this case the team, the perception that needed to be changed, he was beginning to change the perception, not by complaining about it or arguing with it, by doing something about it. And that's what I would recommend to any employee. It's on you to change the perception of their confidence in you to deliver. Because if they thought you could deliver, why would they say no? Does that make sense? And with that, ladies and gentlemen, you've been the beneficiaries of hearing me make all that shit up. Thank you very much.